Hi. This is Jenna having just finished recording 3 hours of Wuthering Heights table talk. And I just want to say that this video will not be 3 hours long. I have not edited. I literally just finished recording. I have not edited yet, but I will not let it be 3 hours. And I don't know how long it's going to be, but it's going to be long. And so I just want to suggest kindly that if you are interested in watching this, that you do it in a few installments. Please do not think you have to sit down and watch this whole thing in one fell swoop. Please just enjoy. I think it'll be about 30 minutes in when I finally start talking about the book, but I'm talking about other important things, I think, before that. But if they don't interest you, you can flash forward till about 30-ish minutes in, and then I do start talking about the book in earnest, and I will not shut up about it for hours. Oh, I just have too many things to say, too many thoughts. I'm hoping to get this down to like an hour and a half. That's like half of what I said, so it's not going to happen. Yikes. Anyway, enjoy this video. Hi. I've been putting off making this video, mostly because I don't want to appear to be riding the coattails of the way that that the recent movie release, all the kerfuffle that's being caused by the recent movie release. So while I could have posted this on Thursday, I didn't even record it. I'm recording it today, and I'm going to post it today, and hope that people who are looking for information about the movie don't find this video. Because I understand, and I promise we'll get into the book in a moment, but I understand that, people with YouTube channels generally want their YouTube channels to grow exponentially. I'm not really one who believes that it's healthy to monetize your hobbies. I don't think that that is a good thing for the hobby itself or for your heart. And that is not a goal. That has never been a goal. And I think that this little tirade, this very gentle tirade, is coming off of the back of just this huge influx of unsolicited requests I've been getting from people who want to help me grow my channel for a cost. That's another thing. That's another thing to talk about. But I tell them, because I'm nice to everybody as a general rule, for up to a point. And so I will initially tell them, no, thank you. That's not my goal. Because I'll get these emails like, you've been on YouTube for X amount of years and you only have X amount of subscribers. And I get so excited when I get subscribers. Do you know why I get so excited when I get subscribers? Because I think, oh, it's somebody who's interested in what I'm doing. I don't think, oh, they like me, or, oh, that's one step closer to making 10 cents a month on YouTube. So I don't want to ride the coattails of this. I don't want to. And I don't want to get any more unsolicited requests to grow my channel. And in a weird way, yes, I want my channel to grow, but only with the right people, like people who want to be here because we vibe. Not because I just want random people. I actually really don't want random people. I mean, the channel has gotten to the point where there was a point where I knew every single person I'd had some kind of interaction with. And when I saw their name pop up on a comment or something, I knew them. And I'm at the point now where I don't. And that makes me a little bit uncomfortable, actually, because I don't want to be that. I don't want to be want to be the leader of a pack. I'm not an influencer. There, that's it. I'm not an influencer. I'm here to share my thoughts with people who find them interesting, stimulating, challenging, affirming. I am not here to skyrocket anywhere. I want my feet firmly planted on the ground. So I think that is where this is coming from, and maybe I'll cut this out, maybe I won't, I don't know. I do think that it's important to be said though, like, people have different goals, right? And don't make assumptions about me or this channel because I have a channel. Like, I'm quite happy with the speed, the tortoise pace with which this channel has grown. And now I think those emails that, like, and it happens every few years, like that spate of emails being targeted for exponential growth. And I know their game. I know. But that they assume that I'm small and therefore I must want to be big bothers me. That's an assumption that bothers me. And I'm a little bit scared, I think, because I decided to read Wuthering Heights this year, and I've got one video, well, 2 videos that are tagged Wuthering Heights. I've got a playlist that is Wuthering Heights, and I've had some hits on those videos, not a ton, more actually on my first one that calls it a love story, which is understandable. It's not gone viral or anything, and I don't want it to, but I've gotten some hits on there randomly because that other video is quite old, several, in YouTube years. I'm afraid to post this one and call it Wuthering Heights anything, because what if people watch it? I know how ridiculous. I'm laughing because I know how ridiculous it sounds for a person who's creating on YouTube to think, oh, I hope no one watches this video. But that's where I'm at with this. That's where I'm at. So I've put off doing this video, and I think I'm still putting off doing this video right this second. So let's just go ahead and do this. I do want to talk about Wuthering Heights, and I did see the movie, and I inevitably will make some sort of comparison, connection, point something out. I will mention it. It will show up in this, but this is not a reaction video, and this is not a movie review in any way, shape, or form. It's just that I need to put out a video in the midst of a wuthering storm. And so I will do it. I will do it. Did you read? Or are you going to read them after we talk? I don't know. I like to go in. I'm doing the Hardcore Literature Book Club, and a friend asked, do I regret joining? Am I enjoying it? And I was like, well, I watch his videos, which are long productions. Like, I watch his lectures after I've read the text because I don't want the influence. And that's how I am about everyone and everything. I want to experience it myself first, and then I want to go in and do like all the research and find all the different ideas and things after I have taken it in and decided what I think. I have always been that way. Yeah, so maybe you watch them after, which is what I would do. Maybe you watch them before. Maybe you never watch them and you were just going by what I say, which in that same conversation with that friend, we were talking about how, well, I was talking about, she wasn't, but I was talking about how, you don't actually need anyone to guide you through literature. You really don't. An English degree is kind of a racket. Because if you want to, you can find whatever it is that you are going to find in a text all by yourself. These lectures that come out, my thoughts here coming out, they're just that. They're just my thoughts. They're how I am reading the book. We all have these lenses that we apply to a story when we're reading it. And so if you don't see what I see in this book right here, if you don't see what I see in this book, that's normal. That's absolutely normal, because we have had, I'm sorry, this is driving me nuts. Scotch tape on my bookshelf. We have allowed too many outside influences to tell us what and how and when to think. And moving forward, I really want to encourage you to read the text and tell me what you see. Reading is not passive. And I think that is what I was trying to get at in that conversation. And then I thought about, will I put these videos out? Am I wanting people to just passively? No, actually. I want you to question everything. And I want to know what you see in the text. So what I tell my students, and they're little, they're young, I teach 9th and 10th graders primarily this year, and they're little, right? So I tell them, sometimes they're hearing it for the first time, maybe you're hearing it for the first time too, I don't know, that a book, is written with a certain intention. An author writes the story they want to write in the way they want to write it. An editor helps them clarify that. But when it joins forces with your psyche and your worldview and your understanding of the world and people and other texts that you have read and other movies that you have watched and other experiences that you have had, when those things combine, it's like this weird kind of magical alchemy and new meaning is produced. So there is the author's intention. There is the author's intent. And we can uncover that and make assumptions really about that to a certain extent. But for the most part, every person who talks about a text is just talking about their experience with the text. Anybody who writes, like Harold Bloom, the man who has his name on every freaking book on the planet, he's just writing from his lens, his experience, his education, his knowledge, and he can see in the text what he sees in the text because of the lenses through which he's looking at it. And I'm going to be controversial here because the man has his name on a million different literary criticism volumes. He's written, umpteen introductions. There's the people who write the introductions. They may have had more exposure to more stories and more ideas than you, but they're no more an expert on life or living or your experience than you. And so the thing that I think that we lose when we go through school and we have, and I'm an English teacher, right? But when we go through school and we have English teachers pushing texts down our throats and wanting us to be able to come to some sort of collective conclusion about a text, I think what we lose is the joy of books of finding ourselves in a text. And I just had this conversation. We're reading Their Eyes Were Watching God in 10th grade. And we listened to a podcast with the woman who wrote a huge biography of the author. Zora Neale Hurston is the author. We listened to a podcast about the biographer. Just total side note, in April we'll be reading, for Books Love Everyone, we'll be reading that biography and Their Eyes Were Watching God. It just so happened that it fell here, and I'm reading it a little bit early with my 10th graders. Anyway, we were listening to this podcast, and the podcaster was saying, or the biographer was saying, that she had been speaking to a group of people on a radio program about how Zora Neale Hurston really speaks to the Black female experience in a way that at the time most writers were not doing. And she gave, a voice to the inner world of Black female humans. and there was a caller who was like, I'm a white man and this book speaks to me. So don't leave out other people because this book speaks to me. And And then she goes on to talk about how important that is, how important to realize that any text, the right moment, the right time, is this perfect alchemical chemistry that creates meaning for you. Bob Dylan once said, and I'll stop, but Bob Dylan once said, when asked, what does this song mean? He was like, I don't know. And you cannot accept that a poet, a writer, a lyricist doesn't know what their intention is in the creation of something. Of something that they're putting out there. But that doesn't mean that they know what it means for you. I just want to add here that is the glory of rereading. I forgot to get to that point. The glory of rereading is that because you are reading it through the lens of your experience grows and changes as you experience, as you grow and change. So when you come back to a book years later, you're going to read it and it's going to be different for you than it was the first time you read it. You're going to understand different things. You're going to see different things. You're going to interpret in different ways because you are different. Yeah. And I don't know what Wuthering Heights means for you. I only know what it means for me. So I just want to make that very clear. I am not an authority. I'm just a reader with a big mouth who has to find people on the internet who are willing to listen to her talk about books. That's how much she talks about books. She's booked out her physical friends. So here we are. Let's talk about chapters 3 through 6. 3, 4, and 5 is what we read. So at the end of chapter 3, at the end of chapter 2, is that right? No, sorry. 4, 5, and 6. So at the end of chapter 3, I knew that wasn't right. So at the end of chapter 3, our good friend Lockwood has arrived back home after his ordeal. And he's met, it says, I'm reading the last paragraph of chapter 3. It says, my human fixture and her satellites rushed to welcome me. My human fixture is the character Nellie Dean. Nellie is the housekeeper at Thrush Cross Grange. We've talked a bit about, I don't remember how much I said. We talked a bit about how this book is about boundaries. In my opinion, this book is about boundaries, walls, limitations. There are limits to what we know. You're going to see a lot of that. We're going to talk about a lot of that in these next few chapters. And there are stoppages, stopgaps, boundaries, blocks, obstacles. And Nellie Dean is going to be our, so Lockwood is our outward facing narrator, our filter for the present the present in the text. And Nellie is our inward facing narrator, our guide, our narrator for the past. We've established pretty clearly that Lockwood is unreliable. Now, the thing about Nellie telling us the history is first we have to decide, is Nellie Dean his human and, the center of the universe? Like, that's how she's described here. My human fixture. So he's orbiting around her and her satellites. All the people in the house are orbiting around her. She's his pole and everything goes around her. She's in charge. She's in a position of power. Nothing is accomplished successfully in the world of Thrush Cross Grange without her say, her planning, her orchestration. She holds the universe together. that's huge. That's a huge thing to say. She's the housekeeper. And so we know Lockwood is not reliable. We're about to add Nellie to our information givers. And we have to decide, is Nellie reliable? But we also have to understand that the past is being filtered through Nellie's experience. Nellie's experience is being filtered through Lockwood's experience and then told to us. Nellie's not speaking to us directly. Nellie is speaking to Lockwood, and Lockwood has recorded it for us. This book is written, yes, by Emily Bronte, but this book is written by the narrator, Lockwood. So he is gaining information from a woman who may or may not be reliable. And then he is, we already know, unreliably filtering that filtered information to us. And because he is descriptive, and because we are more savvy than him, we can infer and read between his lines. We can see through his false understanding to a certain extent. It's a device that's used where the reader is made to feel more knowledgeable than the characters or the narrator in the book. It's something that's used a lot in horror. This is not horror. It's gothic. It's gothic. A friend who I went to the movie with had never read. I went to see the movie with two friends, both of whom have never read the book. One read up on the book before we went, and one went in knowing absolutely nothing. It's so fun to talk to them at the end. Of course, the one who knew nothing, of course, she wants to read the book now, but we were talking a little bit, and I actually sent her this review from Sinead, who I highly recommend you watch her channel if you read horror or gothic literature or movies at all. She is a joy to watch. But I sent that friend this review, which came out a few hours after we had gotten home from watching it ourselves. And I texted it to her, and she watched it, and she was like, that was so fascinating. But Sinead always introduces herself, as saying, like, this is her creepy corner of the internet where she talks about spook things, etc., etc. And so my friend was like, was that supposed to be spooky? Because it wasn't. And then she was like, is the book scary? And I was like, no, but there are ghosts in it. But it does use that feeling that you know more. You're so much smarter. Part of the reason why people who love horror, part of the reason why people love horror in general is that it instills in them a sense of confidence, because they would never do what that person in the movie was doing. They can see that it's, that's, don't go in the basement. Those sorts of things, right? That's what's happening for us here. We're frustrated and amused by Lockwood because it's so obvious to us what he can't see. We have to watch Nellie very carefully as we move forward, because we've got to decide, is she telling us, how is she experiencing, or how did she experience the situation? How is she experiencing the current situation? And what is she communicating to Lockwood, and why? You gotta put your thinking caps on. You can't just read the text and accept the text, because there's a lot of filtering going on. There's a lot of filtering going on. Intentional and otherwise. So he's giving her a lot of power, which, remember, he's writing this after the fact. And so, I assume he's writing it after the fact, because he does, my assumption about him writing it after the fact is that his narrative doesn't stay stuck in this moment. He's not observing. He's going into the past. He's moving into the future. He's melding them together to figure out the present. And so his narrative, he's telling a story that's already happened. The events in this book have already happened. The events in this book that happened to Lockwood about, or in correlation with the events in the book that have already happened. We're okay. We're going to get there. Time is hard in this book. It's hard. And pinning down how what really happened is also very hard. So let's go. She is given a lot of power in Lockwood's eyes. Lockwood obviously really trusts her and believes that she has a lot of control. So it says, I bid them be quiet now that they saw me return, because they're all like, oh, Mr. Lockwood, we thought you were dead, da 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 da. Because remember, he just spent the night during a storm in Wuthering Heights, and they didn't know where he was. It benumbed him to his very heart. He was dragged upstairs, wince after putting on dry clothes and pacing to and fro 30 or 40 minutes to restore the animal heat. I am adjourned to my study, feeble as a kitten, almost too much so to enjoy the cheerful fire and smoking coffee which the servant has prepared for my refreshment. And I wrote on the bottom of that, poor baby. All right, are you ready to get into it? Are you ready to get into it? Because there's so much going on. There's so much going on. So chapter 4 says, what vain weathercocks, but what vain weather we are. I, who had determined to hold myself independent of all social intercourse, and thanked my stars that at length I had lighted on a spot where it was next to impracticable. I, weak wretch, after maintaining till dusk a struggle with low spirits and solitude, was finally compelled to strike my colors, and under pretense of gaining information concerning the necessities of my establishment, I desired Mrs. Dean, who, when she brought in supper, to sit down while I ate it, hoping sincerely she would prove a regular gossip, and either rouse me to animation or lull me to sleep by her talk. All right. So, in other words, he's kind of like what vain weathercocks we are. He's talking about humanity. He's talking about himself. He's talking about Nellie. He's also talking about Heathcliff and all the people at Thrushcross Grange. And he's saying, you know, how self-important it is that we think we can discern the weather. The weather being the events of the last few days, the events of life. He's also referring to, you know, what brought him to Thrushcross Grange in the first place, which is his little Jane Austen-esque episode by the sea with the young woman. He's like, how silly of me to think that I could predict how things would go. That I could predict the weather, that I could understand the weather. Like the weathercock is that thing that's on top of the barn or the house that spins to show you which way the wind is blowing. Which immediately put in my head, quite creepily, Gene Wilder's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Willy Wonka, something about they're in the tunnel, who knows which way the wind is blowing, is it raining, is it snowing, is... something blowing. Is it raining? Is it pouring? Oh, I don't know, but it's in my head and it's creeping me out. Have you seen that? Maybe I'll put a picture here.
Is it raining? Is it snowing? Is a hurricane blowing?
It's super creepy. Anyway, as is fitting, I think. So how vain we are to think that we can know which way the wind is blowing. And Heathcliff here, he's going to continue. Heathcliff and Cathy both are going to be compared. Who's Cathy? Cathy are going to be compared to the weather. We're going to understand their emotions. We're going to understand their internal state through what's going on in the weather, which is something I think the movie does well. So he says that he gets home and he thinks he's going to want to be alone after all that he's been through, which genuinely he has been through a lot. Like, he had that crazy dream. He had his hand grabbed by a ghost. He then blocked that ghost out of the room after like scratching her, after making her bleed on her wrist. And he had to deal with like the whole like running to steal the lantern, which is one of my favorite scenes in the whole book. He actually has had a lot to deal with. We'll give him that. For a man who is having to face the fact that all of society is not as orchestrated as he believed it to be. He's doing okay, right? He's doing okay. He thinks he wants to be alone, but then he realizes he doesn't, and he realizes that he actually wants company. I mean, this is what got him to Wuthering Heights in the first place. He took I can't say it. He took Thrush Cross Grange. It's that s together that is so difficult. Thrush Cross Grange. He took it to let. He rented it so that he could be alone after everything that happened to him by the sea. And within moments of arrival, he's tramping across the moors to go see his neighbors, you know, the Heathcliffs. And so he's always lying to himself. He's like, I want to be alone. Oh, look, I need people. And so he learns pretty quickly, well, pretty slowly, because he goes back a second day. He learns eventually that perhaps the company at Wuthering Heights is not the company that he wants to keep. It's a strange sort of company for him to choose. It should be the right sort of company for him to choose, according to all the rules of society, but it's not. And Nellie, who is a housekeeper, is probably not the right company for him to choose. Remember, we've established he's probably a younger man, maybe in his 20s. I hope not 30s, 20s. Based on his behavior and his understanding of the world. And Nellie is an older housekeeper, a step above a servant, a step into the light, closer to the light than a governess. Not the kind of person that you're just wanting to spend hours and hours and hours and hours talking to if you're a 20-something landed gentry, right? So she appears to be the wrong kind of person. She is more civilized. I'm putting that in quotations because it's his thought, not mine. But she's more civilized than the people who should be his equal socially. We're on the first sentence of the first chapter that we're going to talk about. We got to move forward because we're at 37 minutes already. I'll cut some of this down, of course, but I don't know. I'm kind of liking the vibe of the video, so probably not much. Okay, so he's hoping that she will be a regular gossip. He wants her to be chatty. He wants her to spill the tea, right? So it says, you have lived here a considerable time, I commenced. Did you not say 16 years? 18, sir. I came when the mistress was married to wait on her. After she died, the master retained me for his housekeeper. So she showed up, she's not from Thrush Cross Grange. She showed up at Thrush Cross Grange with the lady of the house when the lady of the house married the man of the house. And she's been living there for 18 years now. He says, indeed. So he's trying to set her up to talk by asking her about herself. And she gives a solid answer, but then does not continue. So he's trying to prompt her, but also awkward, like, indeed. There ensued a pause. He decides she is not a gossip and less about her own affairs, and those could hardly interest me. So he wants her to gossip specifically about the neighbors. And she doesn't seem like she's going to be that person. However, having studied for an interval with a fist on either knee and a cloud of meditation over her ruddy countenance, she ejaculated, times are greatly changed since then. So while he's watching her and thinking, it's okay, Lola, people are taking trash outside. But while he is watching her and thinking about how he isn't gonna get the story, she's sitting there like a little internal combustion engine going, what do I do? How much do I say? Should I tell him? Should I not? Should I keep it to myself? And then she says it. She says it. Times have changed. Times have changed. Yes, I remarked. You've seen a good many alterations, I suppose? He jumps on it. Ooh, really? Times have changed? Tell me more. Tell me more. I have. And troubles, too. And here we know she's gonna gossip. She's gonna say it all. She's gonna say it all. Oh, I've seen many troubles. And he thinks to himself, troubles? Oh, I'll turn the talk to my landlord's family. I thought to myself, a good subject to start. And that pretty girl widow. So, you know, the girl who's at the Grange who is pretending to be a witch to get Joseph off her back. The one who he thinks, oh, she's married to the younger man here because she's never known anyone better. And I'm here now, so I better not make her feel bad about her choice because I'm so good. So he's like, I wonder if I could fall in love with the pretty widow. I should like to know her history, whether she be a native of the country or, as is more probable, an exotic that the surly indigene will not recognize for ken. So he wants to know if she's from there. Is she one of them? Or has she come from some far off location like the town 2 towns over, and so they don't accept her into the fold because she's a stranger. No matter how long she's lived there, she's a stranger. And we'll see that idea a lot. It's that boundary thing again. They do ask the question that I asked you to ask, or that I said you should be asking in the first few chapters. Why does a rich man like Heathcliff need to be renting out Thrush Cross Grange in the first place? And to kind of get her going, Lockwood says to Nellie, he must not be that rich, right? If he has to rent this place out, you know, why doesn't he live here? Why does he live there and rent out the nice place if he's that rich? He must not be that rich. He must need the money. And she replies very quickly, rich sir, he has nobody knows what money, and every year it increases. So we still don't know the answer. Well, according to Nellie, and remember, we're trying to decide if we trust Nellie. But according to Nellie, he is just really stingy. He's really greedy. He really just wants more and more and more and more. And so he is renting it out, even though he doesn't need to, because he desires more. I may have to make a second cup of coffee for this video. And then he had a son, it seems. Yes, he had one. He is dead. And here he goes. And that young lady, Mrs. Heathcliff, is his widow? Yes. Where did she come from originally? Why, sir, she is my late master's daughter. Catherine Linton was her maiden name. I nursed her, poor thing. I did wish Mr. Heathcliff would remove here, and then we might have been together again. So he's heard this name before, Catherine Linton. Well, he hasn't heard it. He has heard this name before, Catherine Linton, because the ghost introduces herself as Catherine Linton. He's also seen it written down in the book, in the bedchamber box thing. He's read the book, and he's seen Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Heathcliff, Catherine Linton, and then bang, 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 knock, knock, knock on the door, baby. Knock a little louder, sugar. He hears, who are you? Catherine Linton. I'm Catherine Linton. 20 years I've been out here in the cold. What's that cute girl's name? Catherine Linton. So he's going, what? He literally says, what? Catherine Linton, astonished by a minute's reflection, convinced me it was not my ghostly Catherine. Then my predecessor's name was Linton. So he's like, so the people who were in Thrush Cross Grange before me were named Linton. So you, Nellie, came here with a girl who married into the Linton family, had Catherine Linton, died, and then you raised Catherine Linton. And then Catherine Linton married Heathcliff's son, who is not the guy who's living, but the kid who died. Okay. Now is when you might want to start drawing those family trees. Because One of there's, okay, I've seen so many funny posts from people about the names and the naming in Wuthering Heights. There's this one which really cracked me up. And then there's this woman.
I was just thinking about Mrs. Earnshaw. Mrs. Earnshaw? Which one? What do you mean, which one? Do you mean Mrs. Earnshaw, married to Mr. Earnshaw? No, Mrs. Earnshaw, married to Mr. Earnshaw. Do you mean Frances Earnshaw, married to Mr. Earnshaw?
But she's pretending to have a conversation, a gossipy conversation with a friend about the people who live over in Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange and their names. So there are a few reasons why the names are going to get so confusing. The names, it was pretty traditional to name your children after yourselves, after parents, after grandparents, after ancestors, to kind of like keep a name in a lineage. It was pretty common. So there's that. There's the tradition, the norm. But Wuthering Heights people don't really follow norms. So there's got to be more to it than that. There's also this boundary thing. Like, it's really hard. It's time. Like, it's really hard to keep things straight as far as time. When what is happening is told to you is happening, but it also is told to you in the present, which is for us the past, which is for the people, for Emily Bronte, because this is historical fiction. Time is not linear. It's just this blob. And these characters are not individuals. They are a blob. And yet there are spots on the timeline in this blob that you can point out and be like, that was then, this is now, that will be. But what will be is now, and what was is now as well. And you can say, this is Catherine, this is Heathcliff, this is Edgar. We don't know him yet. But you can also say, this is Catherine, and this is Heathcliff. There are distinctions and there are no distinctions. There are nows and there are no nows. Everything. There are thens and there are no thens. Everything is now and everything is then and everything is will be and everyone is Catherine. One of the most famous lines, we haven't got to it yet. I'm sure you've heard it. Nellie, I am Heathcliff. Boundaries. This book is about the things that hinder us, the walls we put up, and those that we are trying to overcome that we did not erect ourselves. Boundaries. Okay, so the names are going to get real hard, and it's going to be funny, but it's going to be frustrating too. And that's because every Kathy is Kathy. Yes. So Nellie raised Catherine Linton. Nellie also probably had quite a place in Catherine Linton's mother's life if she came over to the Grange with her when she came to be married. And the Lintons, we now know, lived in Thrushcross Grange before Lockwood. And we know that a Catherine Linton ghost came knocking on a window at Wuthering Heights asking to be let in after 20 years of isolation. And we know Heathcliff threw himself at that window, after playing it cool, kind of. Heathcliff threw himself out that window shouting, "Don't leave me, come back, come back." But we also know that most likely Catherine Linton is Catherine Linton's mother and was married to a Linton. Curiouser and curiouser. So we get into all the weird name stuff. I won't read it now, but, well, maybe I will because it's kind of important for the relationships here. So he asks, who is that Earnshaw, Hareton Earnshaw? So he's really just interested in trying to figure out, how can I get with the only young woman that I've seen in this entire 2 houses that I've been in. in the last 3 days after having my heart broken by the woman at the sea who I was sure was the one. How did I get with her? It reminds me of Romeo at the beginning of Romeo and Juliet. He's, the beginning of Romeo and Juliet, he's all into Rosalind. Rosalind. Ooh, I think that I'll marry her. Juliet, who I've seen for 2 seconds, and who is my family's sworn enemy. I think I'll fall for her. So you've got Lockwood going, woman by the sea, woman by the sea, woman by the sea. Ooh, witchy woman. Yeah, I could, yeah. It's been 3 days. Yeah. Yeah. So he's like, what about Hareton? What's the deal there? What's the deal there? Who lives with Mr. Heathcliff? Are they relations? No. He is the late Mrs. Linton's nephew. Okay. The late Mrs. Linton's nephew, the young lady's cousin. Yes. And her husband was her cousin also. One on the mother's, the other on the father's side. Heathcliff married Mr. Linton's sister. So here, without the details, we have the entire family construct. We have 2 houses, not alike in any way. We have 2 houses. In the one house, we have, for sure, in Wuthering Heights, in the past, for sure, we have the now deceased Mrs. Linton. She's not Mrs. Linton when she's at Wuthering Heights, but she's going to make that traverse and become Mrs. Linton. But we have her over here, and she's got a brother named Hindley, and she will have a daughter named Catherine, and he, Brother Hindley, will have a son named Hareton. And somehow Heathcliff and young Catherine Linton and young Hareton Earnshaw, and don't forget Heathcliff's son, young Linton Heathcliff, the deceased, will all end up living at Wuthering Heights together. So we know, and over at Thrushcross Grange, we have Catherine, the deceased Catherine Linton, we have her husband, and his sister. And his sister will marry Heathcliff. So Heathcliff and young Mrs. Linton, not yet Mrs. Linton, will marry Mr. Linton, young Mr. Linton, and young Mr. Linton's sister. And from those 2 marriages will be born a daughter, and a son. And that daughter and that son will marry. That son will die, leaving no one at Thrushcross Grange but Nellie, who was the house girl here and moved here when young Mrs. Linton made her traverse. And over here, house, still full house, we have their daughter, Heathcliff, and Heathcliff's nephew by association. Where my beautiful wife, not beautiful, what's the term that Heathcliff uses? Amiable lady. My amiable lady. Where is she, my amiable lady? Where is she, his amiable lady? She's not there. He goes on, I see the house at Wuthering Heights has Earnshaw carved over the front door. Are they an old family? Very old, sir. And Hareton is the last of them. So that boy, who he thought was maybe the husband of the witchy girl, who he thought was maybe Heathcliff's son, that boy is supposed to be the inheritor of Wuthering Heights, but he's obviously not, because Lockwood couldn't, well, maybe not obviously, because nothing runs right, but it should give you pause. Like, why isn't he? Why is Heathcliff the owner of these places? Hareton is the last of the Earnshaw line, and our Miss Cathy is of us. So in that sentence right there, and our Miss Cathy, so she says, Nellie says, very old, sir, and Hareton is the last of them, as our Miss Cathy is of us. I mean, of the Lintons. So Nellie, we're still trying to figure out, do we trust Nellie? Nellie really associates herself with the Linton family, although she's come from the Earnshaws, right? She's come from that place with her young mistress to marry into the Linton family. She's been in the Linton house for 18 years. She is under the employ of Heathcliff as the housekeeper of Thrushcross Grange. So she really is giving her loyalties here. So when we are trying to figure out if what she's telling us is, what's her bias? When we're trying to figure out what her bias is, she just kind of gave us just a pretty clear shot at seeing it, right? Us. She has bound herself with the Lintons, right? Of which Heathcliff is not one. She also wants the tea. It is revealed here that perhaps like they're actually having a transactional exchange here, because she has, like, when she was sitting there trying to decide, do I speak, do I not speak, do I speak, do I not speak, she also had her own intentions, which we can see here, which he didn't pick up on, which we can see, but Lockwood didn't pick up on. So she also wants the tea. She says she finds her moment where he has been asking questions to find out about whether or not he has a chance with this young woman. She has been trying to figure out how to ask him what's going on at Wuthering Heights. So she says, have you been to Wuthering Heights? I beg pardon for asking, but I should like to hear how she is. So the last couple of pages, we've been confirmed that there's no connection in between these houses. We know from Catherine Linton that she's not allowed to go past the garden wall, right? She's not allowed to leave. She's ensconced in the boundaries of Wuthering Heights. And apparently Nellie is not allowed to go there because she says she would really like to know how the girl that she raised is. They don't have contact. That seems pretty strange since they live within walking distance of each other. But it's that boundaries thing. They might as well be on different planets. He says, Mrs. Heathcliff, she looks very well, very handsome, yet I think not very happy. And then kind of to judge how Lockwood judges things, she asks, and how did you like the master, Heathcliff? He's a rough fellow, rather, Mrs. Dean. Is not that his character? Rough as a saw edge and hard as whinstone. The less you meddle with him, the better. I think that that's accurate based on what we have seen of him. And yet we have also seen him cry at a window for a ghost, right? We have been given just a little more unfiltered information. It's filtered through Lockwood, but Lockwood is completely unaware of what he's seeing. He doesn't understand. He doesn't have backstory. So he's just telling us what he sees. And what he sees is a brute of a man who also has some incredibly vulnerable spots. Heathcliff throws himself at the window, crying over the past that he can't get back. past that presented itself to a complete stranger after 20 years and not to him. And we see a vulnerability in him in that. We get to see that. Don't forget it, because that's Heathcliff too. That's Heathcliff too. But Nellie is just focusing on the more obvious, obviously, side of him, which is hard, really hard, and somewhat terrifying. He must have had some ups and downs in life to make him such a churl. Do you know anything of his history? So spill the tea on Heathcliff. Why is he the way he is? Why is he like that? Why is he like that? And I love this little paragraph here, or this little section here. I love it because it says so much without saying much at all. She replies, so what's his history? She says, it is a cuckoo, sir. I know all about it, except where he was born and who were his parents and how he got his money at first. And Hareton has been cast out like an unfledged dunnock. What's his history? It's a cuckoo, sir. So cuckoo birds go and they go to other nests that have already been built and that have eggs laid in them. They kick out that bird's eggs and lay their own eggs in that nest. And the other bird, let's say it's a robin or whatever, the robin comes and cares for those eggs, thinking it's their eggs, and hatches the cuckoo bird's eggs to birth and feeds the cuckoo birds. And yeah, so Heathcliff's history is a cuckoo bird's history. And Hareton is the unfledged dunnock. So Hareton was the robin egg, and Heathcliff came and knocked it out so that others could raise him up. Should be Hareton being raised up, but it was Heathcliff. Remember, generationally, that doesn't feel right, but all the people are all the people. And I love that little description because, again, it says so much without saying much at all. She also gives us one more important piece of information. She indicates that she believes that Hareton does not know that he should be the owner of all of Wuthering Heights, at least, right? He doesn't know that he's been kicked out of his place. She says the unfortunate lad is the only one in all this parish that does not guess how he has been cheated. My question always is, if the whole parish knows that he's been cheated, why doesn't anybody do anything about it? Why doesn't anybody do anything about any of the things that are happening at Wuthering Heights? Why is there no wellness visit? I mean, if Lockwood could get into this place, certainly people who actually know them could get into this place. But they don't. They just leave it. They just let it be. Let it happen. They decide that they need to talk more. And so she goes off to make him some soup, and he chills out. And then we get into it. She returns. And so now he's just going to be recording, for a while anyway, he's just going to be recording what she tells us. And she is a lot less convoluted in her language than Lockwood. I think that, for the first, in my edition, the first 35 pages, I think turn off a lot of readers who are coming to this for the first time, because there's Joseph that you have to get through, and there is Lockwood, and they're both unintelligible in their own particular ways. There's so much going on, like all the social cues are off, which for a modern reader may be less hindering. It would have been incredibly compelling for a reader who is so familiar with the expected social norms to see that nothing is as it should be. But you also have the difficulty of the language, which everybody would have been looking at Lockwood going, what a pompous fool. And it would have been the comic relief as I've tried to present it to you. And everybody would have been reading Joseph either as, oh, I understand him, he's speaking my language, or what is he saying? And so we still encounter him in that way, right? And he is meant to be unintelligible. I think I talked about that in the first video, so I won't go there again. But those are also boundaries. So before we actually can get into the actual story, which will be told to us by Nellie in very easy to understand, easy to follow kind of chronological storytelling, and in language that is accessible. Before we can get there, we, the reader, have to see if we can get over these walls. We have to see if we can get past the dreams and the ghosts and the witches and the dogs and the bumbling fool and the mean ogre. We have to see, can we get past these things to get to the heart of the story that is about to be unfolded before us. The story, the origin story of how all these things came to be. It's going to get, well, it'll still be a little bit slow for the first beginning, but we're going to get a lot quicker now that we are entering just straight up Nellie's narrative. One fine summer morning, all was well. Wasn't it beautiful? Look at the weather. Look at the weather. So she's diving right into this. It says, before I came to live here, she commenced, waiting no further invitation to her story. I was almost always at Wuthering Heights because my mother had nursed Mr. Hindley Earnshaw. That was Hareton's father. And I got used to playing with the children. I ran errands too and helped to make hay and hung about the farm, ready for anything that anybody would set me to. I helped to make hay. Our first indication that Wuthering Heights used to be an active farm. At least they were growing hay, maybe not to sell it, maybe for their own animals, but probably also to sell. Because on this fine summer morning, something unusual is about to happen. But, you know, every time we see Heathcliff, it's windy, or it's rainy, or it's storming, or it's snowing. And here we have pre-Heathcliff lore. It was a fine summer morning. Okay? It was a fine summer morning. It was the beginning of harvest, I remember. So they do have this harvest. It's significant enough, making hay, harvesting, it's significant enough to be remembered as like a time marker. So it's a big enough deal. Farming is a big enough deal at Wuthering Heights in the past that it's indicative of the time of year. Mr. Earnshaw, the old master, came downstairs dressed for a journey, and after he had told Joseph what was to be done during the day, he turned to Hindley and Cathy and me, for I sat eating my porridge with them, and he said, speaking to his son, "Now, my bonny man, I'm going to Liverpool today. What shall I bring you?" We find out that he's going to walk for 3 days to get to Liverpool and back. At the beginning of harvest? So it's kind of a strange choice to just head off to Liverpool, to be gone at the start of harvest for 3 days. It's kind of a strange, random choice. He asks both Cathy and Hindley what they would like. He's going to walk 60 miles there and back. So he says, you know, tell me what you want. I'll bring it back for you, but make sure that it's something small. I'll bring you back something small. And so Hindley asks for a fiddle and Cathy asks for a whip. Nature versus nurture right here. And he did not forget me, says Nellie. He had a kind heart, though he was rather severe sometimes. He promised to bring me a pocket full of apples and pears. Those must be some big pockets. But what a lovely thing to do, just for the neighbor girl who helps out around the house. 3 days later, he comes back. 60 miles there and 60 miles back. And presumably he had some business to attend to in Liverpool. So he's walking 60 miles in a day? Apparently so. I mean, maybe here and there he might get a ride for a mile or two, but that's slower than walking, most likely. So he's on a mission. We don't know what he's doing. It doesn't make much sense. If it were the end of harvest, Maybe he's going to make some sort of transactional deal, but it's the beginning of harvest. If it were the beginning of the planting season, maybe he's going to get seed. Also, incredibly important that he's going to Liverpool, because Liverpool is a huge port city. And the fact that it is a port city is what makes it more likely for what happens to happen. Because what happens is that it grows dark, and at about 11 o'clock on the third day, the door latch is raised quietly, and in steps the master. He throws himself into a chair, laughing and groaning, and bids them all stand off, for he was nearly killed, and he would not have such another walk for the 3 kingdoms. And at the end of it, to be flighted to death, he said, opening his great coat, which he held bundled up in his arms. See here, wife, I was never so beaten with anything in my life, but you must even take it as a gift of God, though it's as dark almost as if it came from the devil. We crowded round, and over Miss Cathy's head I had a peep at a dirty, ragged, black-haired child, big enough both to walk and talk. Indeed, its face looked older than Catherine's, yet when it was set on its feet, it only started round and repeated over and over some gibberish that nobody could understand. I was frightened, and Mrs. Earnshaw was ready to fling it out the doors. She did fly up, asking how he could fashion to bring that gypsy, or Romani is what we would say now, into the house, and when they had their own bairns to feed and fend for, what he meant to do with it, and whether he were mad. So he has just walked 60 miles there, done his business, and walked 60 miles back, carrying a 10 to 11-year-old boy who's fighting him the whole way, so much so that he wraps him up in his overcoat to carry him home. It's a fine summer day when he leaves. Why is he bringing a coat? But he wraps him up in his overcoat and brings home this Romani child. Why? The master tried to explain the matter. So the master tried to explain the matter, but he was really half dead with fatigue, and all that I could make out amongst her scoldings was a tale of seeing it. Now they're going to refer to Heathcliff, because this is Heathcliff, as it until he gets a name, and then he will become Heathcliff or him. They're going to call this child it. So seeing it starving and houseless and as good as dumb in the streets of Liverpool, where he picked it up and inquired for its owner, not a soul knew to whom it belonged, he said, and his money and time being both limited, he thought it better to take it home with him at once than run into vain expenses there, because he was determined he would not leave it as he found it. The conclusion was that my mistress grumbled herself calm, and Mr. Earnshaw told me to wash it and give it clean things and let it sleep with the children. So I do think, I'm not always a big fan of reading the notes while reading the text, but I do think that there are 2 notes here about the origin of Heathcliff and the connection to Liverpool that I think are very interesting in this version. So I am going to pop back into the notes and point out a couple of things. So that phrase, that line, the master tried to explain the matter, on page 350, it gives you that note. And I want to give you that note because it does tie into one of the poems. And as you know, I have been reading the poems, looking for more Wuthering Heights. And here they're making that connection for us. So we would be remiss to ignore it. So it says, explain the matter. The mystery of Heathcliff's childhood and the relentless cruelty that develops in his character is perhaps anticipated in Emily's poem of 1839, The Soft, Unclouded Blue of Air. But did the sunshine even now that bathed his stern and swarthy brow, oh, did it wake, I long to know, one whisper, one sweet dream in him, one lingering joy that years ago had faded, lost in distance dim? That iron man was born like me, and he was once an ardent boy. He must have felt in infancy the glory of a summer sky. whoever put together these notes is making a connection between this poem and maybe the origins of Heathcliff. And I think maybe based on that connection of the character, the cruel character, this cruel-ish man, this hard man, the summer sky, like these things seem to be indicating that perhaps her imagination is taking the same seed to grow two things. And in it, it's doing exactly what I'm asking you to do. In this poem, it's doing the same kind of wondering that I'm asking you to do about Heathcliff when I say, remember that vulnerability, remember that he's hard, but he's also the man who runs to the window crying, right? And this poem is asking you to do the same thing. It's asking you to look at this hardened man and think, oh, we were both babies. We were both children. We both had happy moments. We both might be reminded by a summer sky of a time when we were, to quote something that's going to be said in the book, young and wild and free. He's human. He's human. And does inside of him, underneath the boundary of that hard exterior, is there a softness? Is that child inside? I think that's an important note. And then also the Liverpool thing. There's a note, but then there's a quote from Emily Bronte, a biography by Winifred Guerin. And it says, in placing Wuthering Heights within the possibilities of its author's experience, it is of interest to remember, finally, that in August of 1845, Branwell was sent to Liverpool. Branwell is the Bronte's brother, his ne'er-do-well brother. Branwell was sent to Liverpool in the care of John Brown after his dismissal by the Robinsons. We can't go into this. We can't go into this. If you are unaware, here is the very, very, very abbreviated version. Branwell is like the wunderkind, and they all really think that, their hopes lie with him, but they don't. Did I already talk about this? How he dies not knowing that they published anything? I think I already talked about this. So part of the problem with Branwell is that part of the trouble with young Mr. Bronte is that he's got opium and alcohol addictions, and these really kind of throw him back. But he's also, although he goes and is successfully for a couple of years the tutor at the same house that his little sister Anne is the successful and beloved governess at, for the Robinson family, he does have an affair with Mrs. Robinson. That is going to lead to his death, really. It's going to lead to his undoing. And so when he's dismissed by the Robinsons, he's sent to Liverpool with John Brown. And it was the time when the first shiploads of Irish immigrants were landing at Liverpool and dying in the cellars of the warehouses on the quays. Their images, and especially those of the children, were unforgettably depicted in the Illustrated London News. Starving scarecrows with a few rags on them and an animal growth of black hair almost obscuring their features. The relevance of such happenings within a day's journey of Haworth, collection were made in Haworth Church for the victims of the Irish famine, cannot be overlooked in explaining Emily's choice of Liverpool for the scene of Mr. Earnshaw's encounter with the, quote, gypsy brat, unquote, Heathcliff, quote, dirty, ragged, blacked hair, as dark almost as though it came from the devil, unquote. It spoke, quote, some gibberish that nobody could understand, unquote, as did the children of the famine who knew nothing but Erse. Is it Erse? Erse? Emily left her readers intentionally in doubt as to the origin of her hero. He could be the Emperor of China's heir, or, as Charlotte thought, and I cannot quote what Charlotte thought. It's very racist, an African. But who can say that he was not first given a being and a body by Branwell's report of starving immigrant children in the Liverpool streets? Branwell's visit to Liverpool was in August of 1845. The writing of Wuthering Heights belongs to the autumn and winter of that year. Everything is okay. It's weird, but it's okay. The missus has grumbled herself into a calm. Nellie's cleaning and washing the boy. And then, remember, he promised to bring them some gifts. So Hindley and Kathy contented themselves with looking and listening till peace was restored. And then the children, as children will do, said, "Where's our stuff?" Only to find that Hindley's fiddle has been broken. Catherine's whip has been lost in transit. And now they hate him because obviously it's this boy, this outsider, this entity who their father carried for 60 miles, who is the cause of the ruin of their small gifts, the indications of love and thought. He didn't forget them. He did buy these things. He did try to bring them home, but Heathcliff effectively usurped their place. Kathy spits on him. It's rough stuff. This was Heathcliff's first introduction to the family on coming back a few days afterwards, for I did not consider, she gets banished because Nellie joins in the cruelty. Nellie, as a child, joins in the cruelty. And there is cruelty. When she gets banished for a few days, when she comes back, she learns that they've named him Heathcliff, and I will mention the movie here specifically because it says they named him Heathcliff. It was the name of a son who died in childhood, and it has served him ever since, both for Christian and surname. So in the movie, the father brings home the boy and says, name him Kathy. So it's different than the book, but he's like, name him Kathy. And Kathy says, I'll name him Heathcliff after my dead brother. And I see people like smirk at that, guffaw at that, do an eyebrow raise at that, but it's right here. It's actually in the text. Kids died. Heathcliff becomes Heathcliff because Heathcliff the baby was an Earnshaw who was born and lost. Now, I have heard so many people, it is a very, very common interpretation that I do not personally accept, that this child is somehow a half sibling of these children, that somehow by blood Catherine and Heathcliff are related. Kathy and Heathcliff, I really don't think the text shows us at all that they are blood relation. And I know that people really want to say, you take an award, that father is taking in his own illegitimate child. And sure, that happened. But I think it was much more common to take your illegitimate child and send it to the country, not bring it home from the city. So I think also that we have the understanding, we have the knowledge that these sisters, Anne and Charlotte and Emily, were working on their 3 novels, Agnes Grey, Wuthering Heights, and The Professor, but then Jane Eyre. We know that they are writing these novels together. Of an evening, they're reading each other's work, they are commenting on each other's work, they are editing each other's work, and we have a precedent that we see come later in Jane Eyre. Now, perhaps Charlotte is writing in direct contrast to what she already knows that Emily, because remember, Jane Eyre is written afterwards. So it's written when the professor gets rejected. So in Jane Eyre, we have the character of Adele, who is the ward of Rochester. Adele is the daughter of a woman named Céline Varens, who is the former mistress kept woman of Rochester in France. And it's very clear, everyone concludes, our astute Jane, who is almost never wrong, concludes, and Rochester tells us, and we believe him, that Adele is not his child, but he has taken that child in because that child was starving and being mistreated and not being cared for, looked after, or upkept by the mother who had sent her to the country to be raised by other people. And so he has taken that child in, even though that child is not his. He's doing it to atone for other sins, right? But it's also a possibility. It's a precedent. It's an idea that we know exists within the imagination, the collective communal imagination of the Bronte children, that outsiders can be brought in. Kind of, to an extent, they can be brought in. But it doesn't have to be that this child, that Adele, is Rochester's child for Rochester to care for her. And it doesn't have to be that Heathcliff is Earnshaw's child for Earnshaw to care for him. They could see a need and know they're capable of meeting it to an extent and decide to meet it. We also know from reading further, in these 2 chapters actually, that Earnshaw doesn't feel all that confident in his son Hindley. He thinks Hindley is kind of a mess up of a kid, and he really doesn't like Kathy. He wishes Kathy were more tame, more ladylike, more charming, more calm, more sweet than she is. She is like a wildcat. And he expresses to her quite frequently that he does not like her. He does not like her. And he doesn't say he doesn't like her behavior. He says he doesn't like her. And he expresses to Hindley frequently that he thinks that he's stupid and pointless and worthless. And remember, the man is a farmer. He takes to Heathcliff because Heathcliff, through the many degradations and abuses as a small child who has been starving on the street, taken from the street, and plopped down in this weirdness, Heathcliff, who goes through so many abuses at such a young age, has to put on a thick skin. And nothing appears to bother him. And so Earnshaw really appreciates that in him. And the way that I read this, and the way that I read Earnshaw's favoritism, others read Earnshaw's favoritism as, oh, he's obviously favoring his illegitimate son. Well, that's just not really the way that it worked, as a general rule. That would be much stranger than the strangeness of, especially, please don't think this is my thoughts, but at the time, a child that would have been, a person of color and a white child, that he would not be positioning this child as he does to be one of his own. He would not. And so I really don't think that they are blood related, not just because I don't want them to be because of what is about to ensue, but I really, really don't think that that Emily intends them to be blood related. I really don't. There is, if you want to think about it, that would be another boundary. That would be another boundary. And if you want to read it that way, read it that way. It adds a level of complication that is really hard to get around. But I really think that if Emily intended, she's got all these cousins marrying all these cousins, which of course was acceptable back then, but also not preferred among the normal folk, maybe to preserve a royal line, but not necessarily the norm for 2 families to just intermarry through all the generations like we see here. That is odd. It is odd. And I think that if she intended for them to be half siblings, it would be much clearer to us in the text. I don't think she would have sugarcoated or skirted around that one thing when she's going to be so blatantly out there with all the rest. It just doesn't make sense to me. So it's not consistent with what we see in the text. So I don't think, I would like to dispel the rumor, the literary rumor, that they were half brother and sister, because I really just don't see it. I don't see it, the proof. I really think that he feels for this child. He tries to find a way to take care of this child. And when he can't find an immediate source of fixing it in Liverpool, he brings the problem home. As he starts to see that this child is strong and hard and devoted to him, he starts to think, maybe this is the one to carry on my home and my business, to take care of things. Because Hareton is, according to him, useless, and Kathy is just a daughter. She's going to be married off, right? And he doesn't like her anyway. So he feels like his own two children are worthless. And his hope rests in this cold, hard, sturdy Heathcliff who is devoted to him. I think that makes a whole lot more sense than he's doting on his illegitimate child. Although those stories exist for sure. I just don't think they work the way that they'd have to work for it to be the story here. Heathcliff is the outsider. That is the point. He breaks through the boundaries that he's not supposed to be able to break through. And, well, he forces his way. He burglarizes his way through the boundaries, finds himself. If his story is a cuckoo story, he's taking what was never meant to be his and making it his own. If he were the illegitimate child of Earnshaw, there would be some level of claim that he could possibly take. So yeah, I just don't see it. I don't see it, but we'll keep going. We'll keep going here. Yeah, he goes through a lot of degradation. He's really set up through his antagonist, Hindley, to be a very hard and cruel young boy. And there's an important scene in this chapter where, in chapter 4, in chapter 4, where Hindley and he have a skirmish over a horse. And Heathcliff, you can see Heathcliff is feeling very entitled and feeling very much like if he wants something, he's going to get it. We know he's favored. We know he is by the father. Everybody else hates him. Everybody else mistreats him. Everybody is very cruel to him. But he's got that father wrapped around his little pinky finger. And Kathy, too, to a certain extent, they get into trouble together. Kathy sees in him a rebellion and a restlessness that she feels in herself that she can't express with anyone else. But it's still kind of an antagonistic relationship. And there's a scene where Heathcliff demands that some ponies they've just been given, he finds that his pony doesn't work. And he demands that Hindley trade ponies. And Hindley is like, forget that. I'm going to pick up this big old iron thing and I'm going to hit you across the head with it. And Heathcliff's like, go ahead and do it. Because if you do it, then I'm just going to go and tell Mr. Earnshaw, I'm going to tell your father. And then I'll get what I want anyway and you'll get in trouble. Or you could just give me what I want and you don't have to get in trouble. So we see that side of Heathcliff. We also see the side of Hindley, which gives in and then passive-aggressively attacks. So he gives in, and then when Heathcliff goes to do something with the horse, with the pony, Hindley he entices the pony to trample on Heathcliff. And Heathcliff very quietly takes it. And Nellie says, I persuaded him easily to let me lay the blame of his bruises on the horse. He minded little what tale was told, since he had what he wanted, the horse. He complained so seldom indeed of such stirs as these that I really thought him not vindictive. I was deceived completely, as you will hear. So remember, we're trying to decide, do we trust Nellie's interpretation of events? Do we trust the story that Nellie is telling? We know that her bias is with the Lintons. Her bias is, by her own admission, her bias is against Heathcliff. But we learn something very possibly important, if it's true, about Heathcliff, which I think we will see that it is. But we find something we corroborated by other events and maybe also by what we have seen through the eyes of Lockwood of modern day Heathcliff. of contemporary Heathcliff, we will understand that he's just storing up a list of debts that he is going to make these people pay back to him. Trample me with a horse, you'll pay for that eventually. Hindley is sent to college. And even though Mr. Earnshaw says Hindley was not and would never thrive as where he wandered, so it doesn't matter where he goes, he's going to be a failure. But he sends him off to college. And this really establishes the friendship between Cathy and Heathcliff, because now they can get up to trouble together without the interference of Hindley. And it says, according to Nellie, it says that Cathy was much too fond of Heathcliff. The greatest punishment we could invent for her was to keep her separate from him. Yet she got chided more than any of us on his account. So even though together they got into so much trouble, more trouble than she got into on her own, the biggest punishment was to keep them apart. That's important. But she seemed to like that attention, like any attention is good attention, and the easiest attention for her to get is negative attention, and then she doesn't mind it. And so she's constantly doing things that are over the top, but also, she has a soft spot. It says, she meant no harm, for when once she made you cry in good earnest, it seldom happened that she would not keep you company in your tears, and oblige you to be quiet, that you might comfort her. So she would cause you to cry, and then she would comfort you, and then she would start to cry, and because she'd made you cry and ask you to comfort her. We're going to see that a lot. We're going to see that a lot. They get in trouble a lot together. The father dies while they're all sitting around the fire. And I think that an exchange that's often overlooked, I think, but an exchange between Cathy and her father moments before he dies is really important to understanding why Cathy becomes the woman she becomes. So a high wind blustered around the house. The weather in this always tells you what's going on, and Heathcliff, to a certain extent, is a reflection of the weather, or is the weather. A high wind blustered round the house and roared in the chimney. It sounded wild and stormy, yet it was not cold, and we were all together. Every time we see I in this right now, it's Nellie. I, a little removed from the hearth, busy at my knitting, and Joseph reading his Bible near the table, for the servants generally sat in the house then after their work was done. Miss Cathy had been sick, and that made her still. She leant against her father's knee, and Heathcliff was lying on the floor with his head in her lap. I remember the master, before he fell into a doze, stroking her bonny hair. It pleased him rarely to see her gentle, and saying, "Why canst thou not always be a good lass, Cathy?" And she turned her face up to his and laughed and answered, "Why cannot you always be a good man, father?" But as soon as she saw him vexed again, she kissed his hand and said she would sing him to sleep. She began singing very low till his fingers dropped from hers and his head sank on his breast. And I told her to hush and not to stir. So he's actually died at this point, but they don't realize it for about half an hour. I think that this is really integral to the girl that she becomes, because these are his last words. Why can't you always be a good girl, Cathy? And it's shortly after this that she's going to find herself in the arms of Thrushcross Grange. Yeah, we're gonna let's keep moving forward, and then we'll circle back to why can't you always be a good girl. An interesting little line here. An interesting little bit here in this last paragraph of chapter 5. I ran to the children's room, and the door was ajar, and I saw that they had never laid down, though it was past midnight, but they were calmer and did not need me to console them. The little souls were comforting each other with better thoughts than I could have hit on. No parson in the world ever pictured heaven so beautifully as they did in their innocent talk, and while I sobbed and listened, I could not help wishing that we were all there safe together. I wished we were all dead. I wished we were all dead, is what she just said. What? I wished we were all dead. So for the funeral, Hindley comes home And surprise, surprise, he brings a wife with him. She's an anxious, sickly little thing. And she's extremely afraid of death. They don't know where she's come from. They think she has everything in the house delights her. And so they're like, wow, she comes from nothing. And yeah, she's the one. And now Hindley has taken the place of the father, and he is now in charge of Wuthering Heights. He has inherited everything, and he wants to make a nice little home for his bride. He says things are going to change around here. We've seen a lot of this kind of equality between the servants and the members of the household, and under Hindley's reign, the servants are going to eat in the kitchen or out in the stable. They're not going to interact. And Heathcliff is going to be sent out of the house. He's going to live entirely in the stable. He is going to not be allowed to go to church with them. He is not a member of the family anymore, and he's even lower than the servants. He's going to work harder than the servants. This is all Hindley. And Kathy, you're not going to hang out with him anymore. Except that Hindley, after giving these directives, is in his own little love bubble with Frances, his wife. And, you know, she's not a bad person. She's just kind of an inept person, and a very anxious person, and a very young person. He treats her very well. He genuinely treats her extremely well. I think that her simplicity is reflective of his incapacity to take his place in society. Like, he picks a bride who's easy to catch, and she falls madly in love with him, and he therefore, like, she adores him, and therefore he adores her. Like, his needs are simple. He wanted a fiddle, and it got busted by this boy who then became the father's favorite. He just wanted to be loved. The fiddle, I think, indicates like a creative spirit. And then he gets labeled as this loser, and he brings home a wife who thinks he's the bee's knees. And their relationship there's a boundary around that relationship. Again, I say that bubble, like they fall into this love bubble, and he becomes completely unaware of the happenings in his own home. And Joseph is trying to hold down the fort, the religious fort, and keep these souls from going to hell. But, they're wild, these two children, Kathy and Heathcliff. And they get into a lot of trouble. And one night, they don't have boundaries, these two. And one night, they sneak onto the property of the neighbors over at Thrush Cross Grange. And something happens. They sneak over into the property of the neighbors, and they peek through the windows, okay? And it says, I love this. Heathcliff comes home late without Kathy, and Nellie wants to know where Kathy is, obviously. She's like, oh no, nothing has happened to her, right? Like, she's okay, right? And Heathcliff says, we would just go and see whether the Lintons passed their Sunday evenings standing shivering in corners while their father and mother sat eating and drinking and singing and laughing and burning their eyes out before the fire. Do you think they do? Or reading sermons, or being catechized by their manservant and set to learn a column of scripture names if they don't answer properly? So Heathcliff is saying, this is what his life is like. This is what Kathy's life is like. And they went to go sneak and look through the window to see if the Linton siblings, remember, there's a brother and a sister, because Kathy will marry one and Heathcliff will marry the other. We know this already. But now they're children, right? And so they snuck over there to look through the window to see if the Linton children have as terrible a life as they do. He's being a little sarcastic here. Obviously, he already knows the answer to this. But Nellie says, probably not. They are good children, no doubt, and don't deserve the treatment you receive for your bad conduct. Heathcliff. Now, there has been a moment of sickness. Measles have gone through, and Nellie has had to nurse the children, and Kathy was complaining and difficult to nurse, and she thinks that this is the norm and expects this. And Heathcliff, because he has that hardness, never complained of anything, and this actually kind of breaks Nellie's heart a little bit, and she admits to having a softening towards him after his illness, after having nursed him, after having to care for him. I think what's really important about this moment is this understanding, this knowledge. I don't know if she understands it, but we do, that you really can't hate something that you have to know and take care of. Like, genuinely take care of. She nurses this boy. It's just like when he stops being an it because he gets a name. It's very significant. It's very on purpose, these choices that Emily has made. So once she has had to care for him and keep him alive, she starts to value him as a human being and not just as an obstacle. And she says herself, there was also the removal of Hindley to college. She says that she was in league with Hindley to treat him very badly. But after she's had to care for him and keep him alive, she no longer joins in with Hindley in these attacks on him. Heathcliff has a very, very, very rough childhood. Incredibly so. So they've snuck over and they look in the window, and this is what they see. We crept through a broken hedge, groped our way up the path, and planted ourselves on a flower pot under the drawing room window. The light came from thence. They had not put up the shutters, and the curtains were only half closed. Both of us were able to look in by standing on the basement and clinging to the ledge. So the same boundaries do not apply at Thrushcross Grange as they do at the Heights, where everything is blocked and everything is monitored as far as like who can get in and who cannot. At Thrushcross Grange, the lights are on, the blinds are up, the windows are, you look through them, any old person can look through the windows, right? And we saw, it was beautiful, a splendid place carpeted with crimson and crimson-covered chairs and tables, and a pure white ceiling bordered by gold, a shower of gold drops hanging in silver chains from the center and shimmering with soft tapers. Old Mr. and Mrs. Linton were not there. Edgar and his sister had it entirely to themselves. I love this. Shouldn't they have been happy? We should have thought ourselves in heaven. And now, guess what your good children were doing. Isabella, I believe she is 11, a year younger than Kathy, lay screaming at the farther end of the room, shrieking as if witches were running red-hot needles into her. Edgar stood on the hearth weeping silently, and in the middle of the table sat a little dog, shaking its paw and yelping, which, from their mutual accusations, we understood they had nearly pulled in two between them. The idiots! That was their pleasure. To quarrel! Who should hold a heap of warm hair? And each began to cry because both, after struggling to get it, refused to take it. We laughed outright at the petted things. We did despise them. When would you catch me wishing to have what Catherine wanted? I'd give her anything. I'd give her anything. Or find us by ourselves, seeking entertainment and yelling and sobbing and rolling on the ground, divided by the whole room. I'd not exchange for 1,000 lives my condition here for Edgar Linton's at Thrushcross Grange. Not if I might have the privilege of flinging Joseph off the highest gable and painting the house front with Hindley's blood. Inside, the two young Lintons notice that something is outside the window. They scream for help from their parents. The dogs are sent out, a bulldog, and they grab her. They grab Kathy's ankle and catch them. And it takes a while for them to understand that it's Miss Earnshaw that they've just caught. And then they are like, who's this other guy? Like, he looks terrible. Like, why is she running around with robbers? And here, again, to think about that communal imagination space that the sisters, the Bronte sisters, hold together. It says, very like the robbers were for putting them through the window to open the doors to the gang after all were asleep, that they might murder us at their ease. And so in Jane Eyre, Jane is wandering around. She's starving. She's she is in need of help, but too proud for a long time to ask for help appropriately. And then when she finally does get to the point where she has no more pride, she's that hungry and tired, no one will help her because she definitely looks like she needs help. And so she ends up looking through a window onto a scene, a much happier, more peaceful scene of some sisters, and knocking on that door to ask for help, and being sent away by the housekeeper, Hannah, because Hannah accuses her of being sent to knock on the door by a group of robbers who must be hiding, who, as soon as I open the door to let you in for your help, will come rushing in. You'll let them in and they will kill us in our sleep. And so here you see the Lintons say, who is this young girl and this young boy? Like, this young girl, she appears maybe like she could be the one to be pushed through the window, or knock on the door will let her in, and then she will let in a gang of robbers who will come and kill us in our sleep. Same story. I love it so much. I also love that for the Brontes, it's not just a story that's told because Heathcliff has dark skin. It's a story that's told because they're poor. It has to do with class, and not race. So, yeah. Anyway, small victories with these sisters, who I love dearly, who were definitely products of their time. They realize who the kids are. They completely demoralize Heathcliff. Well, they try anyway. They defame him. They talk so negatively about him, right in front of him, like to his face. And then they're like, you can go home. But this poor little girl who has just had her ankle bitten, she's staying here, and so that we can fix her up and care for her. And so he's sent home to tell the tale, but he ends up staying and staring through the window because he says, if Kathy wanted to leave, then I was going to break through the window, go in and pick her up, rescue her, and bring her home. But Kathy doesn't look like she wants to leave. She's being fed. She's being warmed. They dry and set her hair while he's watching. Like, they go to work to make this little lady a little lady. And she stays. We'll find out what happens when she comes home next month, but she stays. It says, it breaks my heart because you can just see Heathcliff's heart. You can see his heart. I would never take anything that Catherine wanted. Whatever she wants, I will give her. Whatever she wants is hers. I would break through the glass. I would shatter their great glass pane to a million fragments unless they let her out. She sat on the sofa quietly. Mrs. Linton took off the gray cloak of the dairymaid, which we had borrowed for our excursion, shaking her head and expostulating with her, I suppose. She was a young lady, and they made a distinction between her treatment and mine. Then the woman servant brought a basin of warm water and washed her feet. And Mr. Linton mixed a tumbler of negus, of hot wine and water for medicinal purposes. And Isabella emptied a plateful of cakes into her lap, and Edgar stood gaping at a distance, already in love. Afterwards, they dried and combed her beautiful hair and gave her a pair of enormous slippers and wheeled her to the fire, and I left her, as merry as she could be, dividing her food between the little dog and Skulker. Skulker is the bulldog that bit her ankle, whose nose she pinched as he ate, and kindling a spark of spirit in the vacant blue eyes of the Lintons, a dim reflection of her own enchanting face, I saw they were full of stupid admiration. So just by being in her presence, they were coming to life. She brought an energy and a life to them that they did not have before. And then he says, she is so immeasurably superior to them, to everybody on earth. Is she not, Nellie? Don't tell me this isn't a love story. There will be more. There will be more. But this young boy, probably about 13 years old, 14 years old, is so desperately in love with this girl. Heathcliff's punishment upon her return is not the beating that Nellie and he both anticipate. It is the outlawing of him speaking to her. And we'll see how that pans out in the next installment. This is a feature-length film. And I'm probably not going to cut too much out of it. So more power to you if you watch to the end. More power to you if you watch to the end. Until we meet again, I'm just going to end it. I'm talked out. Until we meet again, let's go read.